Thank you very much. The Director General of the Kenya Urban Roads Authority, Engineer Kenoti, the other invited guests, comrades and especially engineers, good evening. Comrades, power. Power. Comrades, power. Power. Naona mukikuja kukula, you don't say the power that should be said when your president is around. First of all, I want to apologize for coming late. I was actually ready much earlier, by 6 p.m. But unfortunately, I got caught up by issues that were very urgent, and I had to take care of them. A meeting that I had to attend, and I really want to apologize for coming in late. Secondly, I was told by Debbie that there'll be a kind of a fireside chat, and therefore I'll not tire you with a lot of this monologue or this speech. I'll just highlight a few things. Maybe we can continue later on that other session, which I had been briefed about. But I want to say that I'm very, very happy to come here in this dinner, and especially in a meeting with comrades of a university that I'm already also a student. I am taking 2 master's degrees. One in the University of Nairobi, that is MA in economics, but I'm also taking another one, Masters of Economics in Public Policy in KU. I have actually been attended physical classes in KU, and in the UN there was a blend. Initially we were attending online classes, but lately also we attended some classes that were physical, and therefore I was attending, and it has been very exciting also, not just to learn but also to socialize with fellow comrades. I just want to highlight in 1 minute, because I'm a member of parliament for Kiharu, and the things that were said here are true. I just want to confirm that since I got the opportunity to serve in 2017, those who know Kiharu is a rural constituency, actually the largest rural constituency in the region I come from. We have around 112 public primary schools and over 60 day schools. We have put a lot of weight in education insofar as NGCDF is concerned. And in that respect, we do both the physical or the hardware and the soft. The soft is where we give bursaries and make sure that comrades and other learners are in school. But also the hard part is infrastructure. Of all our public primary schools, all of them look like what we call academies. Those of us who come from shacks, I can see by the look of your faces, there are those who are brought up in Nairobi, but there are many of us who are brought up in rural areas. From here I can tell, I can even pinpoint. So those of us brought up in rural areas, when the good schools are called academies. So most of our schools, or actually all of them, look like such. All our learners go to classrooms that are tiled in a rural constituency, and it's all the classrooms, not just a few of them for photographs, all of them. We also have a program we run called Kiharu Masomo Bora, which takes care of learners in day secondary schools. And we take care of over 10,000 learners, out of which the fees in Kiharu, in our day secondary schools, learners only pay 1,000 every term. The rest we have done some math, we contribute through NGCDF, and we have made it possible for learners across the country to come and learn in Kiharu with only school fees of 1,000 only per term. They eat in school, and we provide other learning materials in those day schools, because Because beyond making education in terms of accessible, we are also deepening knowledge by facilitating textbooks, building laboratories, building libraries, and that is an ongoing process even now that we are doing. Now, I want to go to what brought me here. And I am sure you knew I am not an engineer. Or my background is economics. And it's actually for that reason. Because I don't want to say what engineer would put forth, because I can't compete with him in that arena. Mine is economics. I don't know which is superior, but let me leave it there. I wanted to say, but I think you already know which one between maybe economics and engineering. But the reason you invited me is on the economic side. And I want to paint just a picture, because Debbie came to the office and she enumerated the expectation that you have. That I may not be technical in terms of what you are learning in school, but everything we do in school and what we end up doing afterwards is all around economics, because we exist in an ecosystem of a country, and a fabric of economic growth is economics. And there are two things you look at when you are dealing with policy. And forgive me when I'm talking about these things, because whereas you are an engineer now, or you went to school and pursued civil engineering, I believe majority of us in this hall may not end up building roads or in water. Many of you will also be in policy, in leadership, guiding the broad part of the country, not necessarily the engineering part. And therefore I'll be broad in that manner, because I am sure the specifics were handled earlier. There are two areas you look at when you are managing a country. And there are two policies that are used in management of a country and the growth of it. One, the broad, is monetary policy. And the other broad one is what we call fiscal policy. In the monetary policy is basically what the Central Bank of Kenya or other institutions of that caliber do or engage in their economics. Fiscal policy is everything around interest rates, management of interest rates, of inflation, and all the other areas on that corner. But fiscal policy encompasses everything else. You know, in May, June, in our country, there are two processes we run which are very critical. One is what culminates into what we call finance bill. And the other one is what culminates into what we call the budget in quotes, but you can call them estimates. Now, those two documents encompasses the fiscal policy of government. Fiscal policy is everything about spending and everything about taxation and everything about raising money and spending that money. Everything in that is called fiscal policy. Now, fiscal policy, from where I start and where I sit in terms of the analysis I've done for many countries, including Kenya, is what ends up as far-reaching and shaping the destiny of many economies. The decisions you see leaders take, the decisions you see us making in parliament, the executive making, those decisions are what shapes the destinies of countries. All the countries we may want to study, from the US to the UK, to the Asian tigers, to Africa, to Kenya, where we are today and where those countries are today is majorly out of their fiscal policies, the decisions they took. Now, in that, the country aims to do two things. One of the things that you aim as a policy maker or a policy implementer, the major one is called stabilization. When you see a country stable, for example, in terms of prices, interest rates, in terms of inflation, it is never out of lack is usually based on some engineering, in quotes, economic engineering happening behind the scenes that culminates into that stability. Stability is usually measured in markets, and markets are majorly three. One is commodities market, where we measure it through inflation. The other one is foreign exchange market, where then we talk about exchange rate. And the other one is the money market, and the parameter we use there is interest rate. Stabilizing that needs decision making both on monetary policy and also on fiscal policy. But the more important one that I want to carry all of us along as Kenyans, that we have to embrace facing forward, including engineers in this hall and all the other professionals outside there, is the second part of what policy does. Number one is stabilization. Number two is growth. Fiscal policy majorly is the one that fuels growth in a country. And one may wonder, why is this guy talking about or talking so many jargons? The point is that whatever you face out there as an engineer will be based on a policy and a decision made by leadership. And therefore, no one can remain in the sidelines. That is why, for example, in Parliament being one of the organs of policy, it is a mix of all professions, including engineers, because policy making affects everyone ultimately. And therefore, I don't need to buttress the point. An engineer graduating in Kenya now faces a different environment from an engineer graduating from South Korea today, and faces a different scenario from an engineer graduating from Chad today, or graduating from a university in the UK, and especially being a citizen of the countries I have mentioned. The condition you are facing and the condition they'll be facing is based on some decisions that have been made by their leadership. And that arena of leadership, there is no school that people go to study on being in the executive or in parliament, because everyone has their space there. And I'm sure I'm speaking to some of you as I say so. Now, the countries we want to emulate, and we always look forward to emulating in terms of our small economy like Kenya. Take, for example, the UK, the US, having gone earlier in terms of growth. Just a fiscal policy around industrialization put America ahead of the UK. The UK then came in later. Again, I want you to underline, there is nothing that was invented. What I'm trying to say, see at the US walipata mafuta ama wakapata gold. The only differentiation is decision making that the US leadership made then. When the UK was joining the fray, again, hakuna kitu ilipatikana UK tukaambiwa sasa kuna gold ama platinum. The platinum then was decision making by leadership. Then later on, of course, we have heard about Asian tigers. And these are countries I am always very proud to quote, because in a generation of our parents, our country, Kenya, was at the same level with those countries. You can imagine that Kenya was at the same level with South Korea, with China, just in the generation of our parents or our older brothers and sisters. Again, decisions of leaders made an influence on what the countries are today. That the GDP per capita of a Kenyan then, in the 1960s, was equivalent to a South Korean then, and equivalent to a Chinese then. And now, we are talking about a South Korean being richer in terms of GDP per capita more than 20 times a Kenyan. There is nothing different, that there was no change of weather. There was no change of minerals. The only change that was there is the decisions that the leadership of South Korea, for example, General Park made, the decision of Deng Xiaoping from 1978 made in China. The only difference is that and what the leadership in Africa and Kenya made. And therefore that calls us that we also have to stop now pointing fingers, and especially as scholars, including engineers here, that if the decision making of leadership is so far reaching into a destiny of a country, then we cannot remain in the sidelines and then only blame those who are there. We have to take up the matter and enter there also and be part of the good decision making for the benefit of our country. Unaniangalia namna gani? As I go to the conclusion, maybe the other matters we can handle later in the other show. Let me tell you, comrades, every one of us here, everyone without exception, want to graduate and become rich. I am surveying tables here. I have not seen a table of people who are graduating aspiring to be poor. Now, there is a story I always give. When I was graduating in KU, my first degree, and I hosted people for the graduation dinner, my parents, I told them to pray for me, not to get a job. Not to get a job. Now, when you start talking about this, you may be confused with the satire we see of public speaking and motivation we see on social media, where a person says, I became a millionaire from one egg. I'm sure you have seen that satire. I became rich by starting with 1 shilling. That's not where I'm going. If you study the Forbes list, the Bloomberg list of the richest to the wealthiest in terms of their net worth, I have never seen a description of a person listed there that this is an employee of this company. I always see the owners of stakes, owners of shareholdings, founders, or investors. So as you graduate, take some time, for example, go through the list of 1,000 richest people in the world. It gives you many things there. One, it shows you that entrepreneurship is a very good arena if you want to make it in terms of making money. And I think majority of us are in that race of making money. Don't look at me like it's because of my second name that I am in the race of making money. It's not just the people of where I come from who want to make money, it's all of us. So check there. You'll see something profound. One, entrepreneurship is a very good route. But number two, it helps you to look at the sectors. You know, base my thinking always. First degree is the foundation. It doesn't mean that everyone who is graduating as a civil engineer or who will be graduating as a civil engineer has been cemented into only doing civil engineering. I don't believe that. Just the same way I did BA, my first degree. It doesn't mean you continue doing a profession called BA. Just the same way teachers and the rest. So I am back to the sectors. When you study there, you are able to see the sectors of the current economic situation of the globe and the future, so that even as you step out, you are able to see where you fit. Where are the opportunities? And it may intrigue you, actually. If you look at the people in the US industries making most of the money, you realize it is tech. 10 years ago, it was finance. In Africa now, when you come and study the richest, you realize they are industrialists in the industry or manufacturing, but it is majorly dominated by service industry and especially finance. You go to a place like France, you realize it is fashion. Why am I saying about these things? It guides you at this basic level. All of us at our age, it can be the basis where we are. It helps you to see where are the opportunities in the current world and where is the world going. How comes in the entire Forbes list, there is no one listed there that those people do business in agri? There are no people who are making money in the agri side of the economy. I mean, that's for you to discover and then take your position. But I want to challenge us as we step out. Let us not just look at going to Engineer Kinoti to get a job, going to Kenha to get a job, those in the water sector going to Athi Water and the rest. Let us look at how we can blend whatever we have learned in school with what the world is now in terms of tech, how we can bring that together and blend it between being an economist like myself, how I can also take part in blending that with tech, because basically that is what the world is now. Being an engineer in the water sector or the road sector or the other sector, how I can blend the basic knowledge I have with tech to enlarge my opportunities for today and tomorrow. Let us spend some time in that. And lastly, I have seen there is gain into also thinking. It looks banal to talk about thinking, but you may realize here as comrades, as engineers, we never actually give ourselves time to think. As a politician, retreating just to think, it is only through deep thinking that you are able to see the kind of things I'm talking about and bring them to a level where they are usable to you as a human being. Let us also invest in that solitary thinking, thinking deep. Let's not just be active vessels. We are just helter-skelter here and there. Let's also invest time in thinking. Out of thinking, we make the right decisions. Out of the right decisions, we are able to leap forward faster. Thank you very much. May God bless you.
Thank you so much. Before you sit, allow me to invite you to the fireside chat with Ms. Debbie Kihara here.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. I'm happy to see everyone from class here today. Najua tumezoea kuonana selt sana, so it's good to see us dressed and ready to have a good evening. So my name is Debbie Wangui Kihara. I am the class representative for the class before us today, and I also serve as the chairperson of the dinner committee. So the purpose of this session is basically to have a basic understanding of the parliamentary processes that happen and how they relate to engineers today. So as we know, Parliament is divided into two houses. We have the National Assembly and the Senate, and our guest here today is in Parliament. So as engineers, our work every day basically consists of using our problem-solving skills in structural, transport, water, public health. But as Mheshimiwa has mentioned, and also Engineer Kinoti, policy and governance plays a very important role in our development as engineers. So maybe to start us off, Mheshimiwa, tell us who is Ndindi Nyoro away from Parliament?
Thank you very much, Debbie. Ndindi Nyoro away from Parliament is Ndindi Nyoro. Basically, some of the things I enjoy doing is everything around investments. Investments take many fronts: private equity, venture capital. I don't think there is anything you can ask me about Nairobi Securities Exchange that I have not interacted with, because I've seen engineers can start things, but you can get a chance of owning them by investing in those ideas. And that is basically everything about venture capital, private equity, which I started doing since campus, in terms of NSC, but of course the other two later on. And of course from there, apart from investments, I was looking around to see the kind of football team people support here. Besides that, beside being in Parliament, beside investments, I also support Man U.
Okay. You also mentioned Deng Xiaoping.
Because I read a lot. I mean, anytime I'm not anywhere, you can be sure I am either holding a book or a magazine. If it's a book, it will be about economics. If it's about economics, majorly about Asia, because Asia relates more with Africa, only that they have gone ahead. If it's not that, you will always get a Forbes magazine in my vehicle, or there's a magazine called Entrepreneur, Economist, because I read them and I feel like I'm in holiday.
Okay, so paint us a picture then of the timeline of the budget making process from when it starts to completion, with mention of the budget review paper, the BPS, and finally the appropriation bill.
The planning of a country's financials or policies starts with a broader one, which is more encompasses a longer period. In Kenya, we have it called Vision 2030. Every country will have their years. In China, for example, they made one in 2015 called Made in China 2025. Every country will have a longer term kind of planning. From there, it comes to medium term. Medium term is where you find something like BROP, that budget policy paper. It encompasses, let's say, depending on the country, majorly 5 years. And then from there, the country makes something called budget policy statement. It gives limits of expenditure for each department or MDA. And the very latest document that is made is called the estimates, which culminates into becoming the Appropriations Act when it is signed. It gives authority for those MDAs now to spend monies, public money. Now, the reason I have given that background is that because all are important. When a country starts deviating from making the current budget to address the vision that was made earlier, then growth becomes haphazard. Then secondly, as you may be aware as engineers, majority of the programs and projects of government are a multi-year. And therefore, if you make a budget that does not speak to last year's one and does not speak to the next financial year's one, then you may not end up making a coherent budget. The previous one has to be spoken to by this current one, and the future one has to find a voice in the current one. Because if, for example, Engineer Kenoti has a project that has a period of implementation of 3 years, then it needs to be spoken to by 3 budgets. That is why that happens. On the other side, the country comes up with something called the revenue raising measures. In Kenya, it has come to be known as the finance bill. Now, the only thing that we need to look at as a country is that that kind of a bill should not be made every year. Because if every year investors foresee there will be changes in policy, either in taxation or in other policies affecting their businesses, that they are not able to plan for the long term. So in many countries, and that is what used to happen in Kenya before, revenue raising measures were not as drastic. We were able to make one that you can plan with for the next 5 years, only with small variations year on year, so that even you as an investor, you are able to work your medium-term plans based on a policy that may not change so suddenly.
Okay, so I have a specific question about the BPS. I know that the budget policy statement 2025, as you mentioned, it's guided by 2 things: the government agenda, that is better bottom-up, and also the medium-term plan vision 2030. So allow me to ask then, for example, if you have a road project, the average lifespan of tarmac road flexible pavement is around 20 years. The maximum amount of years that a regime can have in this nation is 10 years. So should engineers really be guided by the government agenda, or should they be guided by the long-term plan? Because most of our projects, the lifespan goes into the hundreds of years. For example, dams.
I look at it in 2 ways in terms of engineers. One is in terms of profession, but second is in terms of self-interest. Starting with the self-interest, because that's what becomes an amalgamated macro perspective. I think for me as if I were an engineer, I would look at where can I fit in? And where can I fit in must be guided on where is the government going? Where is the spending going? Where is the policy going? I would, if I were you, I would look at how much is the government investing in what kind of infrastructure? How much is the government spending in roads? What is the projected spending in the road sector? How much is the government spending in the water and sewerage sector? What is likely to be the spending in the medium and longer term? That guides you to see where opportunities are likely to be. In terms of profession, versatility of the profession, of course, government policy is important. To look at, like what you've talked about, the longevity of our projects, so that, again, goes back to self-interest. You are able to tell between building and maintenance, what is the government giving more weight? And the reason I'm talking about government here is because you realize most of what you end up doing will be government funded. As civil engineer, yes, there are many private opportunities out there, but there are also equally as many around government. I would also look at the trend in terms of the private sector. For example, if you are an engineer in Singapore today, and you are a structural engineer for building houses, in an economy where 93% already own their own homes, you look at the opportunities which are available in that kind of a situation. If you are in Kenya, you can consume even data from KNBS. It's always very good. In fact, I always see, sorry for digressing. If, for example, I come here and quote figures from Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, some people may think I'm already fighting those who are in government. Yet I'll be quoting the same figures made by a government institution. What I'm trying to say is that there is some data you can make good use of from Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, because it enumerates so many facets around engineering, infrastructure, and everything else, to see where the threats are also in the private sector, insofar as your profession is concerned.
Okay. During
and sorry, let me interrupt a little bit. There is something I talked about tech. You know, one good thing I love about how the world is, there is usually no stopping. Technology always comes to evolve things. Now, for example, everyone with a meter in Kenya, Yastima. I mean, there's no person paying a bill without a meter. But there is a description of those meters. Meaning, there used to be meters, for example, ile ya kitambo ya kutumiwa barua kwa posta. Now, technology came in with a new technology, and therefore a new opportunity. Now, if our engineer, for example, in water sector, I'll look at how can I blend my knowledge. Take, for example, metering. We may say they are smart meters, but the beauty about technology, it keeps on upgrading. So you are able to look at where the opportunities are, and where there is lack of opportunity, actually is an opportunity by itself.
Okay. So during Engineer Kinot's speech, he mentioned policy and the importance of policy and governance. And engineers may feel a little sidelined when it comes to policy making. What advice would you give us to fix ourselves in that process so that we feel like our ideas are being reflected, especially in the legislative arm of government?
There are many things you can do around there. In a country like Kenya that is rather quite open, there is nothing you cannot push to the floor of the House. And there are many routes to that. You can do it as a petition, as a private citizen, as an engineer. You can use a member of parliament to make a debate out of what you want made. But lastly, you also have an opportunity to be that person, being that MP. It is that open in Kenya. That even in the qualifications of how you get elected, you are not asked whether you have a course in politicking. That even an engineer is qualified to be there. And you have many of them in parliament.
I think that's a challenge to engineers in the room, that they should organize and make their voice heard as they wish it to be. So the last part of this session is to ask, so now you've spoken mostly from your national government point of view. So for the county governments, what role can they play in absorbing recent graduates from university, especially in development agendas? And what is your opinion on what can be done better to streamline this process?
Can I paraphrase?
Yes.
What is it that engineers can offer to county governments? Because you've asked what county governments can offer. And I'm asking that because we are always conditioned to look for an opportunity that is already defined. Fortunately or unfortunately, the most defined opportunity we know is a job. So in other words, you're asking me, how can an engineer get a job in a county government? Now, I'll look the other way around. So even when I talked about South Korea growing, the people who grew South Korea are not the government people. It was Hyundai, Samsung, and the other types like LG. So we need, might take my personal opinion, we need to focus more on that. As a people, we must detach from the idea of going to school to fit into a job that is already created. And especially in an era where it is too disruptive in terms of technology. And we must also be driven by self-interest. If you focus on your self-interest as an engineer, you'd never look for an opportunity in a county government because it will never remunerate you enough. You can get much more from what you've learned without focusing there. So if I'm to answer that question in a single line, brand those opportunities, create new ones outside of that area.
All right, I believe we've had a very informative session. Do we have questions from the audience? Maybe we can take one or two. Najua tuko njaa. None? Okay. There's one? Okay.
Round of applause for Adrian as he comes to the stage.
Yes, good evening. My name is Adrian Nyoro, as I've heard. So my question is only one. During the speech you gave us, or rather the points that you are saying, one, you said that during the committee or the meetings in Parliament you usually have for creating the or the policies rather. So my question was, by the time they were in the chair of the budget committee, what were the policies, or what were the rather the key points or key areas that looks in, especially in this sector of engineering, that you can share or enlighten us, that maybe are new and maybe not many people know about it?
That's a good question. Unfortunately, all that we deal with is in public domain. So it may not be secretive. I may not give you a secret of opportunities because budgets are usually public documents. But I have seen a deceleration in terms of spending in infrastructure. Maybe Engineer Kinoti had noted that. If you compare, for example, this year's budget with the last one, we continue to spend less in development. So that then tells you, Wero, that we may not continue to be absorbed through public spending or our brains, and I'm talking about all of us in this hall. Opportunities may be out there. Because if budgets for critical infrastructure continues to diminish in aggregate terms, and also as a share of the total cake, then in my opinion, there are better opportunities out there. But the other thing I have seen, as a person who is graduating now, you may do a study and realize most of the people who work for Kera, Kura, Kera, Kenha, Kura, Kera, you will trace they are almost the same age. Because when entities are created, like the ones that were created then, now government hired them. So I'm just trying to tell you, even as you look for opportunities in such areas, it is good for you to face the reality. I have, for example, done a basic research. Out of the regional managers of Kera, you realize almost all of them were classmates. Because this authority was created at a point where then it hired these people. And after hiring, they never needed to hire much more. So I see more opportunities outside because government spending continues to shrink. One, because the kind of infrastructure that was done for the past 10 years was done on borrowed money. Now, when times comes to pay, the urgency becomes on paying for what is already done, other than fundraising for what needs to be done.
Have you been answered? Okay, very well said. Thank you so much, Mheshimiwa, for coming and gracing us today. We have another question. Rais. Njo.
Yes, thank you, Debbie. Mheshimiwa, just have one question. You said that as fresh graduates, we need to think of how we can start our own businesses and become creative in various avenues. But if you are to be very frank with you as students, of course, we all know that the major problem that we have as youth is lack of resources. I'm sure most of us have big ideas, and Sharif, I can tell you he wants to become a contractor, but he lacks the finances to start his own company. And by the time that he starts working, till he builds his own money to start a company, it will take so much time. And before you came, Engineer Nyoro said that we have a problem of poor financial management, which is very true. So by the time that I get enough capital to start a business, it will take so much time. And yes, you said that South Korea and much of the Asian tigers companies were where we were back then, and that they were able to grow. But there's also this point that at least for them, I'm sure, of course I've done some little reading, but for them, after the war that they had, like South Korea, Taiwan, the world invested more into their countries, even China. The world gave them funding, and then they're able now to reinvest themselves. But not for us as Kenya, we lack that funding as a nation, whereby that I can get money to start up my company. So that's where we get beaten. And as much as, yes, we have the ideas, but hakuna pesa kwa mfuko. Na hata hiyo ile help pia haitoshi ya kuanza biashara, kama ni kuna ile hustler fund si mingi ya kuanzisha biashara. So how now can we access funds? Na pia ukipa mzazi pesa, pia hana pesa. So just tell us how we can be able to earn money or to source funding to start our own businesses, so that we as well, we can become rich as you and as our mentors here. That's all. Now, thank you so much. Before I end, by the way, Mheshimiwa played a key role in my campaigns. Thank you so much on behalf of me and the team. Ubarikiwe sana. Asante sana.
Thank you very much, President. There is some inaccuracy in terms of the countries that I cited. Those countries never leaped forward based on external money. It was based on internal resources, but depending on external markets. When you talk about South Korea, there is no company you'll mention that is not globally domiciled in South Korea that is not South Korean. The multinational you see in South Korea, what they have done is to get out of South Korea. It is not other multinationals from other companies that have gone into South Korea. The same with China. China opened up much later. The policies they were making were leveraging on external market, but using internal resources. And resources is not always about money. Resources is also about labor. For example, if you look at some of those economies, inaendanga hii inaachia hiyo. This is what I mean. If you look at Japan, the primary level of production of Japan was basic manufacturing. Then, after investing in basic manufacturing, the owners of capital got more capital out of the profits and upgraded it to more sophisticated manufacturing. What they did is that labor became too expensive in Japan. They could no longer do plywoods or do apparels. They handed that over to countries like South Korea. South Korea did dried fish, like these big companies we see, Samsung, LG, and the rest. They were doing basic manufacturing, including apparels, dried fish, bicycles. Then after absorbing too much labor, and the owners of capital got money, then they upgrade into more sophisticated manufacturing again. Then that company, labor becomes too competitive that a South Korean can no longer afford to do apparels because the productivity there is not commensurate to the opportunities in the economy. So that company then has over to Vietnam, for example. Then Vietnam does the same and has over to the next one. So you realize now in that frame, they are using internal companies, mostly internal resources, but more importantly, internal people, internal labor. So it's only when labor becomes too productive or you mechanize too much and it is no longer a labor-intensive venture that you hand over to the next country, and then you upgrade to the one that you require less labor, pay that labor more expensive because you have mechanized more. So domestic resources can do a lot, and especially when you make a policy that is eyeing markets beyond the local one. Now, in terms of now micro, that one was more macro. Micro is the one you asked about. You are telling us to start businesses, but the biggest handicap is capital. I do not find better way to answer that than to look at the graduates like you, those we can call mentors, what preceded. Was it capital or the idea? Now you realize in this country today, there are many people who would want to find good ideas which can be commercialized to become businesses, but they don't know where to find them. Then you ask yourself, the owner of the idea and the one with the capital, who is to look for the other? For example, if I ask all of us here in this hall, who has ever cared to look for the venture capital companies in Kenya today? People in this hall. Who knows any private equity fund in Kenya that exists in Kenya today? Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft only became what they are. Not because of the idea of Bill Gates, not primarily because only of the idea of Mark Zuckerberg or of Jeff Bezos, but also on the seed capital and the venture capitalists who invested in them early. So, for money to come, there has to be an idea. And that is why you always see the intersection of the tech in the US, answering even that micro question, is, or a question that is speaking to an individual, not just the macros, was an intersection where a good idea in universities like Stanford or Harvard gets a hungry investor in the name of a venture capital or an angel investor or a private equity, and that intersection of Wall Street and the universities creates what we call the Silicon Valley. But money alone will not make a Silicon Valley. It is money and the idea. Now you look at what do I have now? What I have now is an idea. My advice is keep polishing it up. Then on the other person with the money, what I have is the money. What I don't have is the idea. It's for them to continue looking for the most polished idea. That intersection creates a commercial company where you now commercialize your idea.
Very, very well said. We have questions from our team. Yes? Two questions from the DDOS and from Engineer Nyoro.
Thank you, Mheshimiwa. My name is Johnson Kinywa, the Dean of Students, taking care of these students. When Losha left the office, the incoming government said one of their handicaps is the resource. So this is a rejoinder question to Losha. They say they want to know about resource mobilization and partnership. So in their training next week, they actually pointed at you to come and empower them, considering they have so many projects they want to accomplish within 1 year, but they don't have enough resources. So they want to get from the horse mouths who have made it, how do you mobilize resources to carpet to tile all the schools in Kiharu, make them academy, and they would like also to meet the student needs within the University of Nairobi within the shortest time possible, because their time frame is only 1 year. So within that time, how do they raise the resources and meet the student needs? Thank you.
Just to confirm, I'll be coming. I've been chatting with the Dean, and I'll also be attending that function. I'm sure we can handle that more holistically there. Thank you very much, Bwana Kenywa.
Thank you so much for that presentation. I'm not asking a question, just something that was burning in me. In 2024, now going to 2025, Kenya records 2 trillion mark in last year in terms of fixed deposit. And that means Kenyans have 2 trillion lying in the bank, earning just interest, and there is no investment in ideas that we are talking about. And this is a very great example that we're already gathering knowledge, and we need to start selling ideas so that this 2 trillion that is lying in the bank can be translated into the capital that you are looking for. A simple example I will give you is when we were doing a proposal for Ngong Road, I was still not employed, and that was in intelligent transport system. There was no capital, there was no money, but there was an idea, which was sold to the Japanese. And when they looked at it, they realized that this idea is worthwhile, we can test it. And therefore, what happened is, I also moved to suppliers, and I had a meeting with MedSec that I have an idea that requires cables. And this client, because it's a JICA-funded project, you'll be paid when I'm paid. And because there's credibility in the project, they were able to provide all the materials required for us to do this project in the Ngong Road. The importation that happened in terms of all the equipment on the meetings that we had, some of them I met them online. I Googled some of these companies and strike a deal on a meeting. Some of them flew to the country and came to have a meeting here. And they invested and provided materials, equipments that allowed us to realize our first ITS, which was the award winning in Kenya in terms of ITS for the project of traffic intelligence. So students, don't say that I don't have money, so I cannot run a project. And you've been in this institution for 5 years. How much does it cost for 1 year in a parallel degree program? More than 300 or 400,000, time and everything. So by the time you're finishing, you're already worth more than 500 or 200 million by yourself. You are a working capital. You are a working capital by yourself. If you look at primary school, high school, you finance. If you cost you as a person, just like costing this cake, you will say it is worth. So if we are looking at you, what are you worth in terms of yourself? Those investments is already money. And people are looking for ideas. Even us at NAS, I look for ideas in my people. They come tell me, why not supply something to Kijabe Hospital? We saw they are looking for people to supply eggs. I say, oh, how nice. Let's supply eggs to them, you know. So look for ideas by yourself. Start thinking deep. Stop thinking about where money is going to come from. Anywhere you walk to, people are looking for 2 trillion is lying in the bank in Kenya. Right now, it has gone to above 2 trillion. Just people putting money in fixed deposit is lying there for 3 years. There is no place to invest this money into. So we can tap into some of this venture capital to be able to help us to move forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Engineer. I believe we have had his advice. Do we have any other question? The last one, kindly. Cameraman. And then Mark, Miss Ama, come so that we finish.
Thank you so much. My name is Hassan Mogeni. On Honorable, you have performed so well. I'd like to know what motivated you to do the projects you have done, given that all the MPs in Kenya get the same amount or almost the same amount, but you have this thought about your people at Kiharu. What motivated you to do that, all that?
I mean, one of the things that motivates us is where we come from. Where I come from, in terms of the challenges that are there, just a drive to make sure that other parents do not have to be as embarrassed when they are going to kujitetea mtoto wao sikufukuzwe shule as I did. But also in terms of infrastructure, we have been able to achieve all that actually out of engineering. So I should also commend you as engineers, because we have a program in Kiharu where instead of giving a business person a contract, we engage people directly. And if there is an engineer, then he's not employed by the contractor. He is engaged in the project directly. So we do what is called labor-based. So out of that, we've been able to achieve a lot. If you give a Kiharu school 1 million shillings, and you give another one 1 million shillings, and I'm talking purely about CDF, then this other one, by the time you leave the gate of that school, the contractor leaves with 30%, because they are not philanthropists. They are there to make money. Then the taxman leaves with another 16% embedded in the BQ. So 46% is already gone before you start the project. Now in Kiharu, the first shilling starts from the project and the last one is spent in the project, because there's no contractor in those schools. We have trained our own people, the rather sophisticated skills like fixing tiles. We in-house trained Kiharu people, 150 of them, to do that. There is also a lot of professional painting that happens, which you also trained a battalion of 150. The other labor, like the normal mason, we get it from the local community. When it is dirishas and doors, we have our measurements, we have our standards. So we have standardized. So a classroom has this by this door, this by this window, with this gauge of chuma. So we've already priced it. So there's no room for anyone to even inflate the price. And again, we give that local person. If you are building school A, village A is the one that provides that kind of materials and labor. And if you don't have, the next village provides. So all that ecosystem makes sure that work is done more, then more quality job, but also more importantly, that taxonomy, that area economically also benefits directly from those projects.
Honorable Ndindi Nyoro, my name is Nyoro Gemak. Thank you for being here with us today. As young civil engineers about to enter the field, we are full of hope and passion to build Kenya, quite literally. We believe in the potential of this country and in the resilience and creativity of its people. Many Kenyans, especially the youth, are thriving in global spaces. You'll see guys going to UK, to Germany, to the US. Not because they love those countries more, but because the systems there are structured to support growth and innovation. Yet, Kenya is our home. No matter where we go, this is where our heart belongs. With that in mind, my question is, how can governance, especially in terms of accountability, consistency in policy, and fighting corruption, be strengthened to create more enabling environment for young professionals who genuinely want to stay, build, and prosper here at home? Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's a question that needs a rather political answer, but for today, I will try not to get there. But what in terms of answering that question, sincerity is very important. That's number one. When you are running a country, running a constituency, running a county, running an institution, let's say Kura. Sincerity. This is my personal, my basic raw interaction with leadership. You have to be sincere now, number one, that you want to do some general good. If anything else comes above that, no matter what kind of policy you make, it will not be for the general good. Because people take cue from the leader. Country, agency, constituency, whatever policies I make, but as an MP, for example, in Kiharu, I then say, when Muchaga is being supplied, there is something I'm getting. That policy collapses there, and then hapo. So sincerity is very important. Number two is that even as policies are made, there has to be broad consultations. My training is not your training. So when I'm making policies about you, and I don't consult you as the person who is well versed, then I'll make a policy that is lopsided. Lastly, the broader vision of the country or the agency or that other level of government, whether a county or a constituency, has to be aligned with the times. So that the chips, the parts from the whole, you start with what is it that I want as a whole. I'm making a vehicle. So the wiper, the windscreen, the radio in that vehicle has to fit in with what is already envisioned. But many times we put the cart ahead of the horse. You are here trying to fix things, but you don't know you are fixing them for what. You are making a vehicle, so everything you are doing is aligned. I'm doing a wiper exactly for this windscreen, and it has to fit in. Unfortunately, what I've seen in many countries, including our own, we are very reactive in policies. We make a policy because people have talked about that area. Then we rush, make a policy. But it is fitting into what whole? We have to envision the whole for us to make the parts. I actually don't know whether we still have a whole called Vision 2030. So that the parts we are making fit into that. I am not sure whether we still, at the back of our mind, have that. To cap it up macroly, because you forgive me when I just got back to economics. South Korea, we know today, grew out of a policy that was implemented from 1960 to 1979. What was the whole? The whole was to grow the economy through export-led policies. So you've already identified you want to grow the economy. But the other broader thing is that you are focusing on exports. So you already have the whole. The parts that fill in was then the government sits down and asks, which imports, which exports are we talking about? That is how government literally directly helped Samsung. That is how the government directly through policy assisted LG. The government directly assisted Hyundai. But they are not assisting a businessman to make profit. They were neither doing patronage to assist their own companies to make profit. They were assisting Hyundai to fit in as part of the whole, and it worked.
Thank you. Thank you, Mheshimiwa, for the very informative session. I believe we've all learned something new. I'd like to give Mushemi.
Thank you, Debbie. A round of applause for Mheshimiwa. Maybe before you go, Mheshimiwa, in the eloquence of your address, you have reiterated the words of Professor Stab, President of Finland, who visited the university 3 weeks ago. And he asked us to demonstrate the need to embed intellectualism in political leadership. And I must applaud you for the work you have done in Kiharu, and as well as Rocha said it, you also are holding hands of very many young people out there who have dreams. Thank you so much, and may the Almighty God continue blessing you. Allow me to invite on stage Ms. Vera Gitonga to award and to express our gratitude for you being with us here tonight and for the wisdom and the insights that you have shared with us through your keynote address. A round of applause for Mheshimiwa.